Please be seated. Proceedings are resumed.
Private member motion number 7 of 2016-17, expanded health insurance coverage, to be moved by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the first elected member for Westby.
Recognize the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move private member's motion number 7, standing in my name, which reads as follows. Whereas unemployed Caymanians who seek health cover because of some medical event, emergency, are offered coverage under the indigent plan. And whereas Caymanians who are deemed uninsurable under the health insurance law are also typically offered coverage under the indigent plan or by way of a loan advance for medical purposes. Be it therefore resolved that government consider amending the health insurance law to allow for unemployed Caymanians to be added to a special insurance program for persons under a standard health insurance contract when they register with the National Workforce Development Agency, and be it therefore resolved that government considers amending the health insurance law to eliminate the practice of health insurers dropping or barring uninsurable persons from group policies, and be it therefore resolved that the government considers amending the health insurance law to offer some form of insurance coverage to uninsurable persons which will take into account their income, earning, ability, and their particular case, and be it further resolved that the government considers changing the health insurance policy to allow the ex-spouse of a seaman who was married to him at the time of his seafaring days to enroll in the Seaman's Health Insurance Program.
Is there a seconder?
Madam Speaker, I beg to second the motion.
The motion has been duly moved and is open for debate. As the Honourable Leader of the Opposition wishes to speak further to the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to draw attention to the matter of health insurance as outlined in the motion. Madam Speaker, the Cayman Islands requires the general public to acquire and maintain health insurance. Access to health insurance can be attained by two ways. One, enrollment in an employer group plan, which is a requirement of all employers, or two, individual subscription to an individual plan. All plans must have the provision of the inclusion of a spouse as well as any dependents. Changes to the health insurance law took effect in March 2013, included the following. One, the standard health insurance contract, SHIC, was changed to include an increase in the outpatient benefit from $125 to $400, and an increase in the inpatient from $25,000 to $125,000. The new law also defined the base premium of the new SHIC at $167. The new health insurance law also prohibited the exclusion or underwriting of risk. That is, when you cover the person, but not a specific disease or risk based on current conditions or history of claims, which means the individual person could get coverage, but not for any health issue they currently had or could possibly have in the future, and allowed risk rating of individuals based on their specific health status and risk. Essentially, what this did was it allowed insurers to increase the base premium of a SHIC plan by as much as it deemed necessary to offset the risk of the individual applicant. The insurer would receive an application and perform the risk rating, and if the rating was greater than 2 times the base rate, the insurer would apply to the Health Insurance Commission to approve this rate prior to selling the plan to the applicant. That scenario, Madam Speaker, also produced applications that would be 6 to 10 times the rate, and in mix of these types of cases, the applicant would be deemed uninsurable, and the Health Insurance Commission would certify the individual accordingly. The problem with that scenario, Madam Speaker, in my opinion, is that the individual has nowhere to go. If he or she was employed, the employer would let them go because the employer could not risk having an employee on staff without insurance. Secondly, if the person was self-employed, they could not approach social services for indigent coverage because their income would disqualify them. So what needs to be done? Madam Speaker, I think the government needs to authorize Synoco to create a plan where uninsured persons, provided they cannot get coverage in their employer's group plan, which should be, I think, prohibited from excluding them, that they can buy a plan which will provide them basic coverage from their normal risk and provide specific coverage for their uninsurable risk separately. Then, Madam Speaker, I would think the government should create a specific fund for these uninsurable risks by setting aside a portion of indigent funds to specifically cover the cost of the health needs of these individuals as it relates to the specific disease which has deemed them uninsurable. Madam Speaker, I think to have a law that permits the isolation and identification of such individuals, then provide no avenue to seek redress from such a classification is very short-sighted on both the Health Insurance Commission and the other people working with them. I would think the law should be changed that requires all group plans for both statutory authorities and companies belonging to government and the private sector must permit the lifetime coverage of individuals who have been enrolled in the plan for over 10 years and reached early retirement as per their individual contracts, or the statutory retirement age of 65. The trend of providing a 20 years employee 3 months of coverage after they retire, then force them to go out in the open market and buy health insurance on an individual basis when they are most susceptible to a health risk is borderline, as far as I'm concerned, unethical and shows very poor social planning and very much short-sightedness. Madam Speaker, the ministry might know that the worst part is that the plan the retirees were on before retirement is usually cheaper than what the chic risk rating will produce and has 10 times the benefits. And we should remember few of the GCs insured with Synoco, and few of them provide retirees from lifetime coverage or with lifetime coverage. For example, if you work at Synoco and if you live to see retirement, we could only keep Synoco coverage for 3 months. And I would have to pay for that too. After 3 months, we could only buy a chic plan, and that is, I think, little to nothing when compared to the current plan we are on, seen as a civil servant's plan. So what is the result, Madam Speaker? The SAGC's retirees will go without coverage, don't get routine medical checkups and then show up in the emergency room with a catastrophic event, and we then have to give them indigent coverage and cover this at 100% from the taxpayer. So, Madam Speaker, I'm asking the government to bear in mind and to take action on the very important matter, as it will go a long way in addressing the situation for people who are deemed uninsurable. Madam Speaker, the other part of the motion deals with the ex-spouse of a seaman. Madam Speaker, it's a fact that seamen, women, stay at home and have kept the country going, and something happens, kept the country going when he was a seaman. He comes back home, something happens, they're separated, perhaps not even divorced, and so she loses a benefit. And all I'm asking the government to do is to consider looking at that situation, knowing that the person was there all her life, working, helping the seaman, and now can't get a benefit. And I would think that is appropriate, whether, even if they are divorced, that because of the situation where she lived and worked at that time when he was out, to assist that kind of individual. I wouldn't think we would have a lot of them. I wouldn't think so. So I'm asking the government to also look at that. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize the Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the motion moved by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition provides, whereas unemployed Caymanians who seek health cover because of some medical event or emergency are offered coverage under the indigent plan, and whereas Caymanians who are deemed uninsurable under the health insurance law are also typically offered coverage under the indigent plan or by way of loan advance for medical purposes. Be it therefore resolved that the government considers amending the health insurance law in 3 respects. I'll deal with each of the proposed resolves separately. To allow for unemployed Caymanians to be added to a special insurance program for persons under a standard health insurance contract when they register with the National Workforce Development Agency. Madam Speaker, the first concern set out in the first resolve, I believe is already dealt with by the Needs Assessment Unit. The Needs Assessment Unit was established by the Ministry when I was the Minister for Community Affairs very early in this term. And its purpose is to conduct needs assessments to verify a client's eligibility for assistance. Having carried out the assessment, recommendations are then sent to the Director of the Department of Children and Family Services. And the Director provides advice to the Minister for Community Affairs. And based on that advice, the Minister may deem a person medically indigent or indigent based on resources for health insurance or medical services. Madam Speaker, I think all of us in this House know that many people who you would not otherwise conclude are indigent in that they are making ends meet. They'll be able to meet their daily and weekly outgoings or commitments, will struggle if they have any serious illness at all, because the cost of health care is just so expensive the developed world over, Cayman being no exception. So I know as minister, I had a number of these matters referred up to me, and I was able, pursuant to the law, to act and make the necessary or issue the necessary certificate so that these individuals were able to get medical coverage. I know my colleague, minister, who assumed responsibility for this ministry some 2 years ago, has done the same. In fact, Madam Speaker, I'm about to ask him on behalf of one of my constituents to consider such a matter. So my point is that this is fairly routine. And this is something that is contemplated by the law itself, the provision for the minister to make this declaration. Unemployed Caymanians, to speak to the specific point raised in the motion, unemployed Caymanians registered with the National Workforce Development Agency can seek assistance, temporary or otherwise, until they become fully employed when it comes to medical cover. Madam Speaker, the second resolve asks the government to consider amending the health insurance law to eliminate the practice of health insurance dropping or barring uninsurable persons from group policies. And Madam Speaker, we all know that that has been a major problem, and it creates huge issues for the individual and for government, to whom they ultimately turn for assistance. Madam Speaker, I am happy to say that now, given the changes that have been made to the law, to do so, for the insurance company to do so, would be in contravention of the law, as the Health Insurance Law and Regulations 2013 revision includes provisions to prevent this practice. This is something that we acted on as a government shortly after we took office. And the Regulation 4A of the Health Insurance Regulations 2013 revision provides that an approved insurer cannot deem a person uninsurable unless the approved insurer has made an application to the Health Insurance Commission for approval to do so, which may be varied if considered unreasonable. The approved insurer can provide cover at an increased premium that exceeds 200% of the standard premium. So in other words, if the risk is significantly increased as a result of age or infirmity or pre-existing condition, the insurance company can say that the premium is 200% more than what the standard premium is, but they can't, without permission from the Health Insurance Commission, deem the individual uninsurable. Madam Speaker, the third resolve is that the government considers amending the health insurance law to offer some form of insurance cover to uninsurable persons, which will take into account their income, earning ability, and their particular case. Madam Speaker, this is raising an issue that I would term as insurance premium assistance for persons who are unable to afford their health insurance premiums. In 2013, when the health insurance legislation was revised, the intent was to assist those persons through a funding mechanism. Unfortunately, this has not become a reality, and it is a matter that should be given urgent attention if we expect every resident to have health insurance coverage. Madam Speaker, the fourth and final resolve provides that the government considers changing the health insurance policy to allow the ex-spouse of a seaman who was married to him at the time of his seafaring days to enroll in the Seaman's Health Insurance Program. While the health insurance, Madam Speaker, while the health insurance law makes provision for the widow of a seaman, there is no provision in the legislation or written policy to provide coverage to an ex-spouse of a seaman. Madam Speaker, we have had a discussion amongst ourselves on the side. In fact, we've been talking about this for some time, well over a year. And I think we have concluded on the side that the numbers of widows, shall I call them living widows, or widows with living husbands, or ex-husbands, whatever you want to call them, that ex-spouses of seamen, the number of them who are still alive would be relatively small. And to include them as part of the policy would not create a significant additional expense on the part of the government. And so that is a policy that we are happy to accept, or a proposal we are happy to accept and make the necessary change to the policy. Madam Speaker, to conclude, the motion asks government to consider amending the health insurance law and regulations to include the first three resolves that I have read, and to change the policy to allow the ex-spouse of a seaman who was married to him at the time of his seafaring days to enroll in the Seaman's Health Insurance Program. Madam Speaker, while we would like to ensure that we get all people back into work, I am confident that whilst they're unemployed, given the way the legislation now reads and the policies the government has adopted, while they are unemployed, they are not being denied medical care. And the government, and to move on, the government will support the establishment of a policy to assist persons with payment of premiums and health insurance coverage for the ex-spouse of a seaman. So, Madam Speaker, to the extent that is necessary, the government is prepared to accept the proposals in the motion. I say to the extent necessary because, as I have explained, the majority of the matters sought to be addressed, we believe, have already been addressed by legislation. I've pointed out the two where we believe we can or need to make change. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? If fourth elected member from Bordentown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just rise to give my support to this motion. And I wish to thank the Honorable Premier for his response and agreeing that most of this has either already been dealt with or can be dealt with. Madam Speaker, health insurance is a topic that all of us have discussed with constituents from time to time. And it's quite clear, obviously, that the reason why the Honorable Leader of the Opposition brought this motion is because changes are needed and people are experiencing some hardship in getting proper medical care and attention. I did have a concern about, and it's unfortunate the Premier already responded because I had questions, but the SHIC coverage that is currently offered. I do have some concerns from constituents who say that it's insufficient compared to the price that they're paying for insurance coverage. And I didn't know if the government had an intention of looking at that at any point in time. I know this term is drawing to a close, but it is for some people it is a real concern. But I do support using cynical to offer coverage, especially to the indigent, Madam Speaker, because inevitably when individuals fall short and are unable to cover the cost of health care, it will fall on the government. And I know the government has been very good at providing health care even at its own expense, which I have to be thankful for and grateful for, because there are many people in the community who otherwise wouldn't be able to get medical attention. One of my main concerns, Madam Speaker, is the plight of the elderly. I know that as you get older, the cost of health insurance goes up. And if somehow we can find solutions to alleviate some of that cost. I know retired individuals who are now paying their own health insurance because they're not employed, but those premiums seem to go up and up and up, and their earning potential obviously is not going to increase as they get older. And it then falls on families. Some families are fortunate enough to be able to assist with their care of their elderly, but some families are not. So that is a concern, because the older you get, the more medical problems you're likely to encounter. So that is something that I do have some concerns about. And I do support offering coverage to the ex-spouse of a seaman, Madam Speaker, especially someone who was married to the seaman during his time at sea. Many of these ladies are left in a sort of a precarious situation where they're unable to get medical care, and many of them have opted to only see a doctor in the case of an extreme emergency. And as it goes, if they were to be getting consistent care leading up to as they get older, maybe we could avoid some of these catastrophic issues that they deal with later on. As you get older, Madam Speaker, you're going to need to see your doctor on a more regular basis and have your regular checkups and so on as a preventative measure. Madam Speaker, I do have a few comments about coverage via the NAU, and I fully understand the stresses and the load that is placed on that department, having been the minister's counselor for quite some time. But one issue, and I'm not sure how we will deal with it, but I unless it's changed recently, I think coverage is normally extended in a 3-month period, 3 months basis. And it can be extended after that. What often happens is that individuals who need urgent care will be given this 3-month coverage. But what will happen, Madam Speaker, is that by the time they've arranged, especially if it's overseas, by the time they've arranged for travel and referrals and so forth, that has expired. And then I'm pretty sure the minister will confirm that the individual is back in the office seeking an extension because they actually haven't used it. So maybe it could, if it hasn't been used, it could be extended. And that would be a nice change to the policy as well, rather than have the individual come back in and have to re-qualify. Just to make the process a bit more efficient. I know these issues are, all of us care deeply about these issues, Madam Speaker. This is not something that we should even argue over, because I think we all want to especially be there to support our elderly and the indigent. I know a young lady whose daughter has asthma, and she has to take prescribed medication, Madam Speaker, but because she doesn't have health insurance coverage, but she doesn't quite qualify for NAU assistance, what she often does is get a prescription, but she only fills the cheapest items on that prescription. And as we all know, the most effective medicines are going to be the most expensive. So her daughter isn't getting the care that she needs. And from time to time, I actually will assist this young lady and a few others in trying to get urgent medicines. But if that can be looked at, I know that it's difficult to fit everybody into that category of qualifying for NAU assistance. But there are some some urgent cases out there, especially young children who need medication, and sometimes it proves quite difficult to receive it. And I can't blame, Madam Speaker, the hospital or anyone involved in that facility, because they try their best, but they have policies that they have to adhere to. I'm glad to hear also that but I knew that the issue with insurance companies not covering people or dropping people because they're uninsurable had been dealt with, and I'm glad that that has happened, because again, there are many individuals, and some of us will go through those experiences ourselves, where you have some illness, serious illness, and if insurance company is thinking it's in their best interest, they may not want to cover it, but people do need to have health insurance coverage. We all face illness at one time or another. Madam Speaker, I wonder if government has taken any steps to, or conducting some sort of study into the level of premiums compared to the number of insurers on the island and the limited pool of customers that is available. Because what I think, and this is only my opinion, but what I think could be happening is that there's now so many insurers that the cost of operating those businesses may be influencing the premiums a bit as well. Some sort of examination into that, I think, would be worthwhile, useful, because that is a concern that a lot of people say to me, that the cost of health insurance is moving upwards almost consistently, but they're not satisfied, one, with the level of coverage they're getting for what they're paying, and also it's becoming unaffordable for some people. Some people are opting not to insure, and I think it also has an effect on businesses who are obligated to provide insurance. But I just wasn't sure if government had taken any time to look at that, or if there was plans to look at it, because if it may be that there are so many insurers now that there's a situation where there are not enough people to insure, and so that it's driving up the cost of insurance. Maybe one of the government members, councillor, could address that question. But overall, Madam Speaker, I am glad to hear that we're cooperating on this motion. I think it is something that has to be dealt with now. It's an issue that affects all of us and our constituents. And I really want to thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for bringing this forward at this time. And I am happy to add my support to this motion. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize the Honorable Minister responsible for sports.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, at the risk of not keeping us here too late, I rise to give a brief contribution to the private member's motion, number 7, expanded health insurance coverage, that has been moved by the Leader of the Opposition and responded to so far by the Premier and the 4th elected member from Bordentown. I think the Premier, in his response, accurately assessed that the first 2 resolves have pretty much been dealt with. That is, the first of those, be it therefore resolved, the government consider amending the health insurance law to allow for unemployed Caymanians to be added to a special insurance program for persons under a SHIC, Standard Health Insurance Contract, when they register with the National Workforce Development Agency. And as he accurately explained, that is in place, and we do that now through the Needs Assessment Unit recommendation to DCFS, who in turn sends me as Minister the list of people who have to be added for indigent coverage, and I sign off on that. So we are, I think, covering that area pretty well. We also deal with these on spur-of-the-moment emergency basis, as a lot of my time is taken up, unfortunately, having to sometimes intervene because the system is, for one reason or the other, not moving quickly enough. We do have resource issues at the Needs Assessment Unit, and therefore sometimes there are accurate frustrations and there are emergencies, so we have to do what we have to ensure that people are not hurting when they should be helped. Madam Speaker, we're not looking, and I'm not a mover of this motion, we're not looking to make Cayman into a social assistance state, but we certainly have to take care of our needy people, our elderly, and our sick, and where they can't afford it, it is no one else but us, government, because we all know that pensions and everything, health insurance and all that came into these islands at a late stage. Therefore, there are people retiring now with hardly anything in their pockets. And until that maturity comes along, where we're probably at that point or after, is when you will see people getting, probably depending on their income level, a substantial pension benefit. Madam Speaker, the second resolve was to do with amending the health insurance law to eliminate the practice of health insurance drop-in, and that's been covered. That came in when I was minister on the other side, health insurance. I was Minister of Health, and that amendment was made to the health insurance law to allow both of those issues to be taken care of. Now, looking at the issue of, as Premier nicely called it, I think, insurance premium assistance. This is an area that all of us, I think, will have had representation one way or the other from retired people who will oftentimes come up to me and say, you know, I have a little money. I have a little thing put up for a rainy day, but I don't have no whole heap of money. And the insurance premiums are eating into the little bit that I have, and I need coverage for me and my husband or whatever, or my husband and my wife and I. And if we don't get some kind of help with this or some reduction in the premium, we're going to be in trouble. Now, like I said, I've had that, and I'm sure many people have had that representation made to them. And what needs to happen is, I think, exactly what the motion is calling for, some sort of relief where they cannot afford the full premium, but it's better that they contribute something towards it, and we top it up, then we ended up having to bear it all in due course, because we have put them in a position where there's no way that they can contribute. You know, our older people don't deserve to be stressed as they get older, and one of the things that stresses them is finance and their financial situation, and many of them, as I said, are retiring and with very little. Then we have the issue of as the mover of the motion said, the folks who were employed by SAGCs, and they leave and they have 3 months coverage, and then bam, they're suddenly at the mercy of the market. Now, they will have brought with them pre-existing conditions, more than likely, because they're retired, they're 55, 60, 65 years old, whatever the case may be, and suddenly they have to seek insurance in a very competitive market. As the fourth elected member from Bontown just said, we do have an expensive insurance market, and I tend to agree with him. I think that the pool has been divided up so small among so many insurance companies that premium rates are higher than normal. So when you suddenly come from the comfort of being covered by Cineco or whoever the SAGC had their coverage with, because sometimes some of them are private covered, they suddenly find themselves in quite a pickle, and they have major amounts to find suddenly for them and their spouse, if such be the case, and they can often find themselves in difficulty in no short time. I've had many complaints in this area, and it's something that we need to certainly visit and find a way to work with them, whether it's through extended coverage with Cineco or wherever they had their insurance, or finding somewhere to get them recovered, as it were, and finding an agreeable amount that they can manage, and again we go back to the insurance top up, as it were, or supplementary, because again, these people, they just like anyone else, it just so happens that they work for government, and initially I was talking about, individuals who didn't necessarily work for government, but it doesn't make them any richer. A lot of them are retiring from government with tiny pensions and sometimes tiny savings, because if you're at a middle management level or whatever or below, then you're not retiring with any great deal of money if you've worked for an honest living in this country. That's the reality of what we're facing, Madam Speaker. So I see this stuff starkly because of where I sit. Sitting as Minister of Community Affairs, I can tell you, my days are taken up with a lot of hard luck stories, as though people would say, and a lot of tough times for many people. That's the reality. It's not that the economy isn't doing well and coming around and getting back on even keel, but a lot of people still find themselves strapped for cash and find themselves having to face an uphill battle, especially as they get older. So I certainly support that resolve. And as I said, insurance premium assistance is a nice term for it. I think we need to look at that carefully. And certainly the last one, which is the resolve to do with the widows, ex-wives of former seamen. That is an area that we have not covered in the past under the Seaman's policy, but it is, as all of us will agree, we don't think that number, that's certainly not an increasing number. If anything, it's declining, and the number should not be that great for us to be in a situation where that should put too much pressure on the government purse. So I'm hoping that, I know again this has been an area that I have been lobbied on, my goodness. I believe from the first time I was here in 2005, and after that nonstop by these former spouses who find themselves often, when the husband in most cases has moved on, find themselves really again on a tight purse string and could use the little extra, or the little extra support. And I know that if this comes to fruition, we will have many of them singing praises, because they have been looking for this for a long, long time. So I think, having said that, I won't belabor the point. Promise not to be long, and 7 o'clock is fast approaching. So, Madam Speaker, with those few remarks and contributions to this motion, I would like to lend my support as outlined, and for us to see what we can do in the areas that we have noticed that are still in need of attention. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the honorable first elected member from Bordentown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as the seconder of this motion, I would
For the benefit
to
of
thank
the
the honorable-
record, I recognize the fourth elected member from West Bay.
I'm sure that's who you meant, Madam Speaker. As the seconder of the motion, Madam Speaker, I would like to thank the Premier for accepting the motion. I think it's very timely and badly needed to cover many of our elderly citizens. Far too often persons are dropped by the insurance companies when they hit the magic age of 60 years. After paying life insurance all of their working life. In the cases where persons are covered by Cynical and they can't get their prescriptions filled at the government hospital, I also think that they should be able to go to any pharmacy and get the prescription filled. Many times, Madam Speaker, most times actually, I get calls, people have prescriptions, they can't get them filled at the government hospital, and they don't have the money to fill it. They need help, or they have to wait until the government hospital pharmacy gets the prescription medication in. Madam Speaker, I think we have long been in need of this motion and the amendments to the insurance law, and I think it's high time that we try to help those people who desperately need help at this time. Madam Speaker, I just want to say again, I thank the government for accepting the motion, and I, I will continue to support it. Thank you.
Recognize the first elected member from the District of Bordentown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to rise to offer my support and thank the honorable mover and the seconder for this motion and for the Premier and the Honorable Minister for Social Services. I know the effort that Minister for Social Services has been trying to work with the NAU and how strapped they are for support and time and whatever. I know my colleague, the fourth elected member from Bordentown, has been working with them very closely on an elderly individual, and I'm hoping that that can soon come to some positive resolution. Specifically referred to the spouses, ex-spouses of those who have been asking and pleading for this after their spouses went frolicking in their senior years and they're left hung out to dry. So I welcome this, and I'm glad that the government has accepted and look forward to supporting anything like this in the future.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the second elected member from Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to give my contribution to the private member's motion before us. And thank the Premier too for responding on behalf of us all with regard to accepting the motion. Madam Speaker, my comments would be limited briefly to a number of things that were raised and identified by the fourth elected member for Bordentown, and not intended in any way to be critical of anything he had said. He has identified a number of issues that I think have plagued us all in the health industry, and with regard to the whole issue of health insurance coverage and people getting access to health care. But Madam Speaker, the first thing I would say, I do recall, I don't know if it still is the case, but in case of people who are present themselves at the hospital and have no, and are not able to pay for their services or to make suitable arrangements for the payment for their health care, that the NAU has had people there before. And at this point, I'm not actually sure if they're still there. I would hope so. But that was always the case. That had been the case for at least a portion of the past year, to assist people as and when they needed their assistance with gaining access to suitable, the procedures that are in place still. Okay, that confirms what I would say. Secondly, Madam Speaker, the member made mention of the fact that he knew of several people that were not able to afford their medications. And Madam Speaker, I know that is an issue that HSA is very keen to deal with and to correct. And I think that they do have ways and means in which they can help people to get the medication that they need and are prescribed for them. I think we all know that, and they are painfully aware, that if patients aren't able to access and get the medications that they need, that the alternatives could be far worse and a whole lot more costly in the longer term if people are not getting access to the medication that they have been prescribed for them. So I know that the HSA wants to hear from people who are having those difficulties. And I would say to the member that if you're aware of it, please refer them. Let them see the patient care specialists that are there and have them speak to them about getting it. Madam Speaker, I know that the pharmacies as well at the hospital stock a wide range of generics that patients, while doctors may prescribe a certain medication, there is a viable generic that is available at the hospital for a fraction of the cost. And most of the most widely used drugs that are prescribed in Cayman at the hospital, they carry a generic. And I mean literally cents on the dollar in comparison to what you would pay for the branded drug. So it's important that I think we get that message out to the public. Madam Chair, my final comments really rest around the SHIC itself. And I think it's important that we in the House and everywhere elsewhere recognize that the SHIC really is the foundation plan, health plan for the people of the Cayman Islands. It's a plan of benefits that should be sufficient for most people most of the time. And I'd ask members to note the qualifier, most people most of the time, not everybody all of the time. The premiums themselves for the SHIC, they are regulated by the Health Insurance Commission. It is a one plan that exists where there are regulations and regulatory oversight of the premiums that are charged. And my understanding as to the way it is dealt with is that there is an actuarial assessment done of the benefits to be provided, and actuaries set a range, a band, recommend a range or band of premiums to be charged for those level of benefits. And then the insurance companies, they then write to the Health Insurance Commission and submit their proposed premiums to the Commission, and they use that report to consider whether those suggested premiums are fair and in accordance with the recommendations. If insurers want to charge more, then they have to have specific reasons in order to justify it. And they have to be supported by facts and figures to justify variation from it. And for anything more than 200% of the standard premium, they have to have an approval from the Health Insurance Commission. And in both cases, the insurer has to provide evidence, data to support those variations and different premiums. For someone to be deemed uninsurable, they have to apply to the Health Insurance Commission. And there is clearly a distinction between someone who is uninsurable and someone who is an indigent, medically indigent. And the two are mutually exclusive, so that not every indigent is uninsurable, and not every insurable person is necessarily an indigent. So I think it's important for us to understand what the SHIC really is, and to understand that it is monitored, it is regulated, and that insurance can't just change willy-nilly. They're not able to take and to refuse people coverage under the SHIC plan, as it can for any of the other plans that they may provide for in the marketplace. And so, Madam Speaker, I know that there are always challenges with dealing with issues surrounding health insurance in this country. We're still working to try to make it as fair and as accessible and complete to all, because at the end of the day, what the country needs to focus on and what the ultimate goal is that we have a healthy and active population that is as free as possible from disease and sickness as you can make. A healthy population is a happy population, and one that ultimately should not prove to be a burden to the country. Madam Speaker, with those comments, I complete complete my contribution to this debate and look forward to supporting the motion as is accepted.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize Honorable Minister for Education.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I too rise to support the motion and to reiterate what has certainly been said from my colleagues on the government bench as to the considerations that is already in play, work that has already been done. And certainly I don't want to belabor those points given the hour. But I also want to, Madam Speaker, just really underscore of all of the work that we have been doing on the government side to address some of the concerns raised in this motion, to underscore the importance of the last resolution from my perspective, and that is, Madam Speaker, it is resolving to right what I feel is a real gender inequity that essentially happened from the time the regime came into place. And so I want to lend my wholehearted support to the fact that, as a government, as the Premier indicated, this has certainly been an issue that we have considered amongst ourselves, and concerns have been raised on a number of occasions about the need to address some of these inequities as it relates to recognizing the contributions. And I think this is really tied into the whole idea of making sure that we provide for our elderly, and certainly in no way, shape, or form taking away from the important contributions that our seamen made to this country and shaping the essence of who we are as a people and our cultural heritage. But Madam Speaker, we also cannot afford to not recognize and not acknowledge her story in the course of our history. And so, Madam Speaker, by recognizing in this fashion as it relates to health insurance, but in other ways, the importance that the women of this country played in building this nation and making sure that those who were here when the men were out to sea, making sure the country ran like a well-oiled machine. They were the business women, they were the homemakers, they were the caretakers, they were the backbone of the country as we know it from a domestic perspective. And so, Madam Speaker, I think it is certainly fitting that we honor those women for their contributions and ensuring that we provide for them as it relates to their health care in their golden years, just as we do the men who serve this country in that capacity. And Madam Speaker, we have a long ways to go to achieve that real equality of franchise that we all aspire to. But I believe this is going to take us one step further. And in that regard, Madam Speaker, I certainly support what the motion calls for and the deliberations and the intention of the government to actually consider this and moving this forward. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Minister for Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I too rise in support of the motion. And Madam Speaker, just to add a few words, Madam Speaker, it's no secret that health insurance is very costly in this country. I think there's some 9 companies providing health insurance. So it's no shortage of options, but unfortunately, for many, those options are still unaffordable. Madam Speaker, one of the reasons why health insurance is expensive is because the cost of health care continues to rise. Madam Speaker, with most industries, most services, if there's an improvement in technology, that improvement in technology will result in a reduced cost of providing that service. But the healthcare industry is the complete opposite. Perhaps it's due to the amount of money that's spent on research and development, but improvements in technology never result in reduction in cost. It's usually increase in providing the cost of the service. And Madam Speaker, another reason, of course, is the fact that because of those improvements in the cost of, because of those improvements in providing health care, people are now living longer. So, as you age, your income declines, but your cost of health care rises. So, it takes a greater proportion of your income to maintain your health care and a healthy lifestyle. So, Madam Speaker, the fact is people are needy and they are spending more of their income, whether that is income from employment or income from pension. But the fact is something has to be done. Madam Speaker, on the campaign trail, I tried to listen carefully to what was being said and to comprehend what might be possible solutions. And many people spoke of the cost of health care and the need to return to work, especially those who had retired, whether they were asked to retire at age 60 or they were fortunate enough to make the choice to retire at age 60. But many people spoke of the cost of health care and the fact that much of their income was used to pay for health care or their mortgage. So it is important that we try to find solutions to assist these people. Madam Speaker, I'm not sure as to how many people are aware of it, but the government of the Cayman Islands currently covers approximately 40% of the population. 40% of the population with respect to healthcare costs, that being civil servants, their dependents, seafarers and veterans, their dependents, indigents, and other people who are unable to find insurance. So therefore, it is not an insignificant amount of money to cover. Actually, I think overall the government spends 20 cents on every dollar covering healthcare costs in the country. So if the government, or anyone for that matter, can find a way of helping those who are in need of health care and can't afford it, I think it's something that we should do. But then the question is, Madam Speaker, if the cost is increasing and the numbers of people who are in need of assistance are increasing, then a solution must be found somewhere. And I think collectively, as the people's representatives, we have to find that solution somewhere, somehow. So, Madam Speaker, until that solution is found somewhere, somehow, I agree with with assisting people, those who are, because there are people who can afford to pay something towards the premium. So in my opinion, it is better to assist people in paying something towards their premium rather than not have a program where you assist them and they are therefore unable to find insurance elsewhere because they can't afford the premium, or they are simply uninsurable, or they are unemployed. It is better to assist them, receive some revenue towards covering the cost, because either way, the government will cover the cost of their healthcare treatment. And it is better that they are able to go and get regular preventative checkups as opposed to waiting until it becomes catastrophic because they couldn't go and do their regular checkups. It is with the catastrophic events where people suffer the greatest damage to their health, and the government bears the biggest financial cost. So, Madam Speaker, But I want to turn my attention to the resolve that speaks to the ex-wives of seamen, the seafarers. And Madam Speaker, I have thought about this for quite a while, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. And I thank the Premier for responding on all of our behalf, and saying that we do accept this. Because, Madam Speaker, right across the street, there's a monument to the women of the Cayman Islands. And I often wondered, why put the monument there if the women didn't play a part? And it is when the men were out to sea that the women took care of the household. So if the men are getting a benefit for having gone to sea, shouldn't the women who stayed at home and held the families and the country together while the men were at sea, shouldn't they also be given some assistance? And it is not fair that I'm a man who believes in principle. It is not fair that the ex-wives should not be given some coverage, whereas the new spouse receives the benefit under the seafarer. So in my humble opinion, Madam Speaker, it is only fair that we also look to assist those ex-wives of the seafarers. Madam Speaker, with that, I will conclude my contribution. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'll recognize the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, should he wish to reply.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank everyone who participated in the debate and who so keenly debated the matter. Madam Speaker, I'm not going to attempt to address everything that was said because it would be probably repetitious. Huh? Yes, Madam Speaker, it was all positive. So that's a rarity sometimes. Madam Speaker, firstly, but I'll always agree with some good motions. Madam Speaker, firstly, let me address two things though. We are not asking to develop a welfare state, but we are looking out for the state of our welfare. We have to take care of our people. We have to take care of our people who really can't take care of themselves, and those are mostly the elderly, man and women. And there is no doubt, Madam Speaker, that the economy has some upswing. The ESO has said that that upswing started in 2010. So there is some upswing. The problem is that somehow the trickle-down effect has been somewhat lost, and so our people are not doing as good. And we have to acknowledge that no matter what side of the political divide we are, those are facts. The ministers in government feel it. They have to feel it. And it's not political good to say otherwise, because it's a fact. There is upswing, but our people are not feeling the trickle down for whatever reason that is. And so where our people needs help, government, I have always maintained, has to step in the gap. Madam Speaker, a number of things has been said in regards to what might already being done by needs assessment and changes made to the law. The issue is that the failure of the law and administration to address the law, to address uninsured persons. Where do those persons go? That's the problem. They can't qualify as indigent, but they can't get insurance. And that's a problem that we have. But the government contends that they cannot be refused. In the case of uninsurable persons, they're saying they cannot be refused. But if it is addressed, then government needs to see that the law is adhered to, and I think that's the problem. The law is not adhered to. And, Madam Speaker, while those opposite me don't tend to give me any credit, the fact is that I know what governing a country means, how it's done, and that cabinet faces many, many problems at times that people think they can just up and wave a wand and it is done. But, Madam Speaker, you've been in cabinet before, I've been there, some on the side have been, and we know that that's not how it works. So I am not one of those that's going to continue to beat up on the government. I got beat them and they need to be beat, though, you know. But the fact is that many times government with the best will in the world, for whatever happens in the wider community, you pass laws and it's not happening, not being effective the way government intended. And you got those out there who we are in the campaign stream and they're telling you how much they're going to make it better. But you wait and see. It's like they're going to cut their salaries. You wait and see that too. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Madam Speaker, there is a need to rack up Cynical. Cynical has been a God bless to this country. People say all sorts of things, but the facts are the facts. One thing we know in this House, and as elected officials, we cannot please everybody. That's not going to happen either. That's right. There is a need to rack up Cynical, give them the tools for them to address the matters that the government is saying is taken care of, because the government has done what we as legislators are supposed to do: see a problem and pass a law. I keep telling people, you know, we are not law enforcement. Administration is, civil servants are, police is supposed to make the people obey the law where the people are not obeying it. We are not the people to do that. If we see a problem, we complain about it. But somehow they believe that as elected officials, we can go and administer the law. We cannot do that, and nobody should be making the world believe that that's what we're supposed to be doing. We can't. We can't. We can set policy. And the commission, where people are being refused, the commission is there for that. And the commission has rules and has regulations that must be adhered to. That's what I do know. And so I certainly believe that Cynical has been doing a great job for the country. But we need to rack up Cynical with the tools that they can get more done. And I say that solutions must be found and will be found. Benefits and costs. I don't know that the base plan that the member from Georgetown spoke of that is sufficient enough. And that's what I would certainly want to look at for the future because it's very, very low. But I like the point that we encourage people to do their checkups and become a healthy country, a healthy nation, because that's what will keep the bill down. The country is going to have to come to grips with this matter of cost of health insurance. And there's no use of us standing or sitting here and talking about it. I'm not one, Madam Speaker, to try to hamstring any business. I believe in free enterprise, and I go to my neck to protect them and to help them advance, because I think that's what we have to do. But, Madam Speaker, while I am not one to try to hamstring business to that extent, we have the situation where a family of 4 is paying $1,200 a month out of a salary of $4,800 or $4,900. That cannot bode well for the country, and that's what I think that we have to come to grips with. We have to find a solution, and whether they call us socialists or whether they're saying that we're trying to make a welfare state, we are going to have to come to grips with it. For those that are making $16,000, $20,000 and more, that's okay. All power to them. Fine. But they shouldn't talk about people, the government making a welfare state. When we have people who are working and been working for years and years and years and years, only making $4,800, $4,900 and have to pay $1,200 for their family of 4. That is not healthy. And I say, Madam Speaker, one of the things that I'm going to say to this country in the ensuing few months before general elections is that we have to make some changes. We have to do something. I got some ideas, and I'm not afraid to put out ideas, and perhaps the PPM will come back and take the ideas and paint them red and carry them through. That's all good too. I don't care once it gets done. Yeah, no, we're not going anywhere with it because you've already spoken, and I don't see you having a right to speak again. So I wouldn't introduce anything that would cause you to do that. But the fact is that that's an issue that we all are going to have to address, whatever ideas we come up with to address it. But I certainly intend to put forward more thought on it and ideas that I think are workable as the leader of the opposition in the country. Madam Speaker, I think that I don't need to go any further other than to say that people who are now retired and are paying exorbitant, even for the base thing, $167 or whatever the cost is a lot for a person that is only making $700, $800 or $600 a month in pension, and they are retired. And those are this kind of socioeconomic problems that we have to come to grips with. So, Madam Speaker, it's only left for me to thank my colleagues on this side, the seconder, the fourth member from West Bay for the motion, and the 2 members from Bordentown who spoke, and, of course, my other colleague who always gives his support to what we're doing. Even if you don't think they speak, they're around about that too. But when you speak, then saying, talk too much. You're not able to please them, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the Premier for agreeing to the motion and ask him to look at those areas that they have acknowledged that need some work done on it. And to, what do you want? It must be candy you want. It's not what you're looking from the side, so you got to be. Madam Speaker, good to have some levity. Again, I want to thank the government for accepting it, and there is work yet to be done.
The question is that be it therefore resolved that government consider amending the health insurance law to allow for unemployed Caymanians to be added to a special insurance program for persons under a standard health insurance contract when they register with the National Workforce Development Agency. Be it therefore resolved that the government considers amending the health insurance law to eliminate the practice of health insurance, dropping or barring uninsured persons from group policies, and be it therefore resolved that the government considers amending the health insurance law to offer some form of insurance cover to uninsurable persons who will take into account their income earning ability and their particular case. And be it further resolved that the government considers changing the health insurance policy to allow the ex-spouse of a seaman who was married to him at the time of his seafaring days to enroll in the Seaman's Health Insurance Program. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Against, no. The ayes have it. Motion 7 of 2016-2017 is accordingly passed. I recognize the Honourable Premier for the adjournment motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, at 7:32 p.m., I move the adjournment of this Honorable House until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
The question is that the Honourable House stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. All those in favor, please say aye. Against, no. The ayes have it. The House now stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.